Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs.
Hey everybody, it's Todd from the Guitar Knobs. This is part 2 of our Echopark series. As I mentioned before in part 1, hopefully you listened to that. If you haven't, go back and listen to it. But if you were listening, you heard some pretty amazing stories about his origins. So we're going to continue and see what where he decided to go with the company and the other portions of his company, including amplification and pedals. So sit tight. Here comes part 2 of the Echopark guitar interview. Okay, so you dropped an Echopark reference, and that's going to lead us to Echopark Guitars as we know it today. How did that come about?
So after a long sabbatical, I had our child, and I thought, well, maybe I should revisit this thing. So when I left the industry, basically, I woke up one day and said, I can't do this anymore because I know I'm going to wind up at NAMM with a name tag and a hat and just doing the proverbial wave for somebody else, and I just don't want to do that. Sure, I'd rather just go play and record and figure out what life has to offer on the other side of this thing. Yeah. So up until then, I had not really had any experience outside of the shop. I'd just been like a shop rat, and didn't really know what anything else smelled or tasted or felt like. And so I just woke up one day and said, you know what? I don't want to do that no more. I want to do this, and I want to go see what this is over here. And so I did that for a while. Sure. And I found out what that was. And then once my daughter landed on the planet, I kind of had a little talk with the creator one day, and on the way home from her arrival, and the discussion was something to the effect of like, you got to do something with these things that I've given you, and you got to do them pretty quick, or I'm going to take them away from you, kind of thing. And I thought, okay, I've got a window. I've got a couple of years to decide how I want to go about this. So I took those couple of years and I decided how I wanted to go about this. And I thought, well, okay, I want to start with this gift from Leo first. So I went to GNL and I took that guitar to them in 2007, 2008. I took that guitar.
The one that you...
Yeah, the one that I found in the attic. I took that guitar back to GNL and I said, "Hey, I've got this guitar, and you remember me? Hi, and you should take this and do something in tribute to Leo." And they politely said no. And so on the way home, I had a little discussion again. And it was decided at that time that I would do something with it. And so by the time I got home, I talked to my wife and I said, "Hey, we should, how much credit do we have?"
Anytime a conversation starts with, "How much credit do we have?" It's bound to be interesting.
And she said, "Well, basically, you've got none. So you have to do this some other way." So I thought, okay. She basically said yes, and so I took out a small $500 or something like that, prepaid credit card kind of thing, and bought a 6-inch joiner, a router, a hand router, and I borrowed my dad's bandsaw. That was my grandfather's actually, and I made the first double cut junior. And instead of making the Leo thing, I did the double cut junior because I thought, okay, that's a challenge. Mm-hmm. If I can make this guitar in the backyard with nothing but 3 tools, then I'll know that that's my answer, not the rejection from GNL. But sure. So I put myself to test, and I said, okay, if I can make this thing and it comes out great, I'll hand it to a couple of friends in the industry and see what they think without saying anything, and see what they think. So I did. I made that guitar and I handed it to a couple of friends, Dave Osti, and he played it at a gig, and he wanted to buy it, and I thought, well, that's a good start, I guess. And so I took it to the Orange County Guitar Show or something like that. And it was kind of like a bazaar, kind of like a bunch of used gear and vintage stuff and that kind of thing. And I put it out on the floor in a bunch of other like real stuff, and with no tags or anything on it, just to see if anybody even was inquisitive enough to check it out. And as it turned out, about 24 people I watched walk directly to it, and it was kind of like a weird beam of light in that whole show. And so I took that as like a cue to take it to the. Ironically, in that show was a friend of mine, Mike Lippy, that I had years before as a kid visited his shop, the Guitar Doctor in Burbank, California, and looking through the window as a kid, a 13-year-old kid, kind of watching him, put together. I think it was Mighty Might or one of those early DiMarzio kind of body and neck operations. He would build guitars and repair. And my mom had a seat in the salon across the street, and I would just ditch school and go there. and so ironically, he was there that day, and he was selling a bunch of parts and stuff like that. And I said, hey, I got this thing, and I'm thinking about like getting back into the guitar thing. He knew me from Ibanez and Taco Sono and stuff like that. And he said, yeah, I got this shop in the valley. Why don't you come down and I'm happy to let you, work out of there. So I went down there and the next week and bought a bunch of wood and went down there and started milling out blanks and stuff like that. And him and I were actually going to start a thing together, but he had already had his deal going. And so we kind of made the first 5 double cut junior kind of prototypes. One of which made it to Johnny Two Bags and Social D. Oh. And that was the beginning of Echopark Guitars.
Right on.
Sweet.
Yeah, that was the beginning. So and that was through my friend Steve Human, which was, the bass player in the Vandals. Mm-hmm. And I had some roots in that whole scene.
Yeah, so you had some people in in the right places to kind of help that out.
Yeah, it was cool. I had enough irons in the fire, you know.
Yeah.
And legitimately, not just because I wasn't trying to do anything. I was actually that's how I rolled, So my friend Steve called Johnny and Johnny said, yeah. And so he took it out on a tour and did like a Guitar Center video thing that they did at the time. And so that was it. That was the beginning. Cool. And then after that, Nick Oliveri from Queens, I made him a bass, and I was working for the other guys in the interim. And then it just kind of evolved into all of a sudden, after Nick and I had been hanging out for a while, I actually wound up playing with Nick a few gigs, and that guy's just a riot. So it was wonderful to hang out with him for a while. And just shortly thereafter, I got a call from Brad Whitford, and Brad wanted to check out some stuff. So I sent him a couple of things, and they were scheduled to be in town about 6 months later that year. Mm-hmm. So I made a few things that I thought would be suitable for those guys, and always thinking
those guys that we're referencing are Aerosmith.
Yeah.
It's just for those who are following along. Brad Whitford is guitar player alongside of Joe Perry in Aerosmith, who's also one of the founders of Three Monkeys, amps that we've had on the show.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And so Brad had asked if I would build like a gold top kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I built that and had a koa neck and all that kind of stuff. And in the interim, I was building like the first batch of Echopark guitars, which was about 10 to 12 instruments. And in that batch was a few guitars that I kind of set aside for myself, actually. But I had always kind of thought and always kind of had in my in the way that I build is kind of esoteric. I don't really build like by design so much. I kind of build like spiritually to put it.
Sure. Follow what your soul's telling you.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, this is unique, you know, and being a longtime fan, you know, and worshiping those guys since I was a kid, you know, I remembered what Rats in the Cellar did to me as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I remember those things were like all just so pivotal for me because it helped me escape the hell that I was living in, you know, and it helped me to elevate myself as you know, a living being away from what I was experiencing as a child. And so I thought, well, this is an interesting opportunity. So I started building at that time and thinking ahead, like if Joe ever called me or somebody ever called me and said, hey, I want you to build me a guitar, how would I build that? And so at that moment I thought, well, I'm going to start building like this. I'm going to start building ahead of the tide and start putting, and so I put a little list together of all the great players and musicians and songs and bands that I loved and what inspired me, and I use that to guide me in how I build guitars, and sonically, esoterically, and physically, and ironically. By the time I was delivering the guitars to Brad, Jack Douglas had entered the picture, and Jack kind of interceded in the delivery, and he said, "Hey, you know, why don't I just introduce you to Joe?" And I said, "Okay, that'd be awesome. You know, that'd be great." And so the night that I actually kind of almost missed it because what happened is I was working late. And the sessions were going on at a friend's studio, and they were in town. And I got a call and said, "Hey, Joe's here. Why don't you come down?" And I just finished that first batch of like 7 or 8 guitars, and I thought, okay, cool. So I went down there and I took Clarence. I took the Clarence Custom, the one that I found in the attic. That was the only guitar that I took with me that night, and because I thought, wow, this would be a great thing to show Joe because he loves this kind of stuff. I knew that. So I showed him that guitar, and that was the beginning of our relationship.
Well, that's awesome.
And
someday, if Joe Perry ever called and asked me to build him a guitar, oh, Joe Perry's here and he wants you to build him a guitar, like that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was. So on the way home that night, I called my wife, and I started crying on the phone.
Sure. I can believe it.
And she still laughs at me to this day. But yeah, I mean, and him and I kind of locked horns pretty early on. And actually what was interesting is that I was talking to Billy, his wife, before we actually went into the studio, and showed her the rose patterns and all the different stuff, and kind of just as an artist, you know, because I know she's an artist.
Sure.
And just kind of explaining the process to her. And she said, you know, when we got to the Ghetto Bird, which is the kind of like
that is a gorgeous guitar.
Thanks. Yeah, when we got to that, she said, "Has Joe played this yet?" I said, "No, I don't know. I don't think so." But she said, "Well, why don't you?" I said, I I can't do that. Why don't you? And she said, okay. So they were just about to hit record on some stuff. And she put it in his hands and said, here, honey, play this. And that was the night that I think I stayed in the control room with Steve and Joe for like 4 hours with Jack.
Holy smokes!
And we just kind of hung out all night, and that was the beginning of.
Man, that's awesome.
So
you guys can't hear it, but like my face is getting tired. I'm just smiling. So I love hearing this. This is such a great story.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, I wish I could be more articulate.
Rock and roll, man.
No, man, this is.
Yeah, it was. And I was sitting there, and Joe's on one side, and Steve's on the other, and Steve hands me a bracelet. He said, "Here, man." And he puts it on my arm, and I just little. It's all little shit.
Little
but
thing.
That's like making a bat for Babe Ruth, and he goes and hits a home run with it. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Geez Louise.
And so that night was basically the beginning of Echopark Guitars.
That's amazing.
And so from there, it's just it's weird too, because those guys have like firsts of everything.
Sure.
Like I went through. Joe took me through a personal tour of his collection that night, and because when I got there, he's
The West Coast collection.
yeah, the West, not the Vindaloo collection. And not the Boneyard collection, but just the collection that was there.
Sure.
He took me through every guitar in detail, like exactly everything. And I thought, wow, here's a guy that knows exactly.
Freak.
Yeah, no, Joe is beyond any other guitar freak that I've ever met. He is the iconic guitar freak.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like the other thing that was ironic to me was that like DC Rich, started in Los Angeles. And he and Brad were the first two, I think, along with Rick Derringer, were the first three guys to really really tout that brand.
Mm.
Started messing with what was being done up to that point.
Yeah, and I thought how
Ran with it, man.
yeah.
10-string.
Yeah. And I felt like very blessed and lucky.
That's awesome.
At the time.
So
Still to this day.
we have, I mean, quite frankly, we could probably sit here for another 3 hours and hear since from the beginning to now where we are. At this point, I'm going to encourage people to check out your actual website and find out more about the actual guitars that you're building, that you have available, to catch up to speed. Because I think there's you've drifted into amplification and pedals now, which is probably pretty, I'm going to assume pretty exciting territory for you guys.
Yeah.
Can you start elaborating a little bit on amps and pedals?
And after about 4 years in the trenches, I met Eric through a friend, and
On the floor.
he was sleeping on the floor, at a friend's house, and I felt like I needed to take one step into the next chapter, and I had to think about how that was going to happen. It just so happened that a friend of mine at the time was building amps and had a pretty high profile in the amplifier, the boutique amp world. And the guy that was building all those amps was a guy that I had started spending a lot of time with, and really like getting into like late night discussions, early morning kind of reminiscence on life and everything around wires and pickups and guitars and all that kind of stuff. And so one night, Eric and I got into this lengthy discussion about potentiometers and capacitors, and I left that night and I was like, that's the guy that I need to like bring into this somehow. How can how can I do that? Well, the only answer that I could come up with was, I've got to offer amps at some point. So, being from the Fender alma mater, I thought, well, this is that window that's opening right now. You either jump through it or walk through it or, dive through it. So, but it's going to close eventually. So,
Sure.
Life is like that. You got to take the doors when they open. And I thought, well, I'm going to see how I can maneuver this. And through the course of the next 4 months, I tried to, figure it out. And we eventually got to the place where we figured it out. And the place to figure it out was Alpha Amps. And so he had been working with another entity and developing some stuff and had his own thing going, and it was going south quickly because the well was drying. And so I decided to call on the powers that be and try to wrangle. So that's how the Echopark Amplifiers happened. I just kind of decided that, well, the God that I worship, Leo Fender, was a master at amplifier building first and pioneered that whole thing before he pioneered guitars.
Yeah.
And so why don't I just follow in that? So I called Eric and said, hey, I know your thing's not doing well. Let's see if we can figure this out. And I'd like to help you and bring you into what I do and offer that to the guys that I'm working with now. And so that's how that worked. And I had some ideas, things that I already was doing. That's where we started. Really simple.
So maybe, Eric, you want to jump in?
Well, that's his story, and I'm sure he's going to stick to it. But he's very gracious, I'll tell you. No, I was like a fish that was thrown up onto a sidewalk, and it was having tough times, and mainly because I couldn't figure out really what I wanted to do. You get to a point in your life. I mean, I was really into playing, and that's you could talk for days about that. But it's just kind of like you get to a point in your life and you go, well, what do I do from here? When you put all your energy into that. Yeah, you don't know really kind of. I never thought of myself as a amp builder of any kind, and I still really don't. But I love doing it, and it's. But I'm self-taught, so I don't have any training for it or anything. I just collected tons of amps and did it for decades, and then I had a guitar shop and started poking around on the things and figured out that by visual that I could tell by certain circuits what I liked the way they sounded. And the route that signal took. And that's kind of how I still operate. And so, yeah, I started doing that. And somebody kept begging me to make them an amp. And I kept going like, why? There's so many great amps. I mean, I had hundreds of amps and was swimming in them, and it's just like, why build one? And this was back in the late 80s and into the 90s and the late 90s where it wasn't...
Boutique still hadn't blown up yet.
No, man. And there was like Kendrick and stuff like that, who was just a huge influence. I mean, I loved that guy, Gerald Weber. Very, I don't know, everybody wants to slag. A lot of people like, you're so critical nowadays. I don't know. But that guy to me was just massive and made great amps. And of course, Matchless, that kind of stuff. And it was very cool stuff, and but even that hadn't really caught on. But as a vintage amp collector, let's say, I started realizing that I had to figure out how to fix my own amps. And so, and in San Diego area, a lot of friends let me be their guinea pig, and or they guinea pigged for me rather. And so that's kind of where it went. And then that went on for quite a while until I made an amplifier out of an old organ chassis for a friend of mine, and it ended up being used on a couple records, and I wasn't even finished with it, kind of thing. And it was like, wow, man, I do think I'm on to something here, because I kind of was on top of it at the time, playing and in my mind anyway, of what tone is a very subjective thing, and it's relative to music, and it's just like any art, I guess. But at the time, it was getting to be tougher and tougher to rely on the big names. You know, the Marshall wasn't the Marshall anymore. I mean, in the 90s, it was just bad news, man. I'm sorry. And I don't care whether you like them or not, the way they sound. As a repairman, it was just like, whoa, how cheap can you make these things? And that was their goal, I'm sure, because they couldn't have made them any cheaper, I don't think. And then everything went circuit board and all that kind of stuff. And it was just like, wow, this isn't even fun. You know, as a repair guy, I don't even like it to this day. I don't even like getting those things near myself, you know, and that's what everybody makes nowadays, you know, except for quote unquote boutique builders.
Yeah.
Which is, it's an army. It's an army of people that really prefer things that were done 70 years ago, you know, and that's a technology that was, whether it's archaic or, you know, dinosaur or whatever, those amps are still around and people still play through them. They'll outlive us, you know what I mean? And that says a lot about any product, if you ask me. So the availability of stuff as it came along throughout the late 90s and into the 2000s, it just made it easier and easier. So I started poking around into that and, you know, and I made some huge mistakes. I was very fortunate with some of the early on with the people I worked with, guy Jeff Snyder in San Diego, just like amazing guitar player and builder. He has amps. I'm sure if you Google his name, you'll find his stuff. And I didn't realize that was that was going to be my vocation or whatever. So at the time, I didn't really take it that seriously. But as time went on, I worked with some people that were complete, just like, you know, leatherheads too. And that's because everyone was trying to figure it out, you know, at the time. But
so what is the thing that you have really kind of focused on for your amps? Because I'm gonna make the assumption that there is a focus based on the type of guitar that you make. You know, you have alluded to, your soul kind of tells you what the guitar is going to be, your kind of guitar, right? So I would assume that's carrying over into your amplification and your pedals.
Hugely. And that's where it's like, I think even Gabriel underestimates, and I'm not here to pat him on the back or blow smoke or anything, but it's just like, it's amazing how much he underestimates himself in the influence he had, at least on me. I mean, it's just like collaboration to me is a wonderful thing. I was a little bit narrow-minded and in many ways with what I thought I was even capable of. But in some of my amp designs, I just loved little amps. I love little bitty amps and little guitars. I like things that are little just for fun. I don't know why, but it's just so little amps were they weren't popular at all at the time. But I started collecting white amps, these little off-brand of Fender that were really kind of rare and weird. And so I got into that, and they were just simple circuits, but so pure. And when you put the right speaker in those amps and you play them wide open, there's no better tone on the planet, you know, to this day, I still think. But so that's where it kind of started. And but I hooked up with some people that were just bad businessmen, I guess. And I'm terrible. I'm including myself into that, not really knowing how the big wheel turns. And so Gabriel came to me, and we were already friends. We had met at vintage shows and stuff like that. And he had his guitars, and I was floundering around with my amps, and he just said, like, let's get together and do some things, and it happened instantaneously. And with the first week I was with him, he had already designed some cabinets that were like unlike any other I'd ever played through, and it was just like so. We made amps right out of the gates, and whatever he wanted, I would do. And so that's where it started. And I think, we've come up with some cool things. And in a weird way, it's a tragically, everybody relies on, I grew up with, you had to play through an amp or you had to touch a guitar to decide whether you wanted it or not.
Sure. Yeah.
And now this world has changed massively, and I get it. And I'm tolerant to it because I think the end result can be very, very good. But you still have to have a reference. And this is the difficulty that I have. And I'm still come from a world of the modern media and all this stuff now is finding ways to manipulate that. And even what we're doing here, I think, is
This is real.
This is real. This is real. No, it totally is. And hopefully you would like to think that everything's real, though. I mean, because all you have to rely on nowadays is listening to something on your phone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and fortunately, my relationship to Gabriel was fortunate that we were in Los Angeles, and I think it would have been a lot tougher to do that elsewhere at the time. But once we realized that it was being a hindrance to live there rather than a positive thing, I mean, once you hook up with a few certain people and you start running, it's like, wow, now I'm just treading water because to live here, it costs so much. And that's why we left. But the things we've been able to do, I think, have been amazing. And it's just using two people put their heads together, that he doesn't know anything about amps, you know what I mean? But he does, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I don't know anything about guitars, but I do, you know?
Sure.
So it's just like you put these heads together, and it's just, we've come up with some really cool results that
So tell us a little bit about the amps that you actually have put together, and maybe what you guys might be working on.
Yeah, you guys, I don't know if you're even familiar with the line of stuff that we do, but I've been making amps with Gabriel now for about 5 years, and they pretty much run the gamut, I think, at least in different size classifications and stuff. And like I said, I love small amps and stuff like that, and that's where I always put a lot of focus. But it turns out a lot of the players that Gabriel was hooking me up with are guys that still are able to play through full stacks and stuff, which is almost dinosaur. But, you know, it's still, I think it should be required. Like, you should be required to tour the world if you could in a perfect world. I mean, it's just like to get to play, or it's like riding a Harley and riding a scooter. It's just like, you know, there's something to be said about, you know, getting behind that much power. And it's just, that's always fun. But the little amps still now are the still most applicable in today's world. So it's nuts. But yeah, so we've just been dabbling in all kinds of different things, and we just started some other things we're doing. We're actually not sitting still no matter what happens, because I think a lot of it too is not investing so much. The last thing we want to be is to compete with Fender, Marshall, Ampeg. I mean, I could go on and on. That's not our goal here, at least myself anyway. And so it's like, so you make some sacrifices there too, but it's just like, I'm not cutting any corners. My amps are ridiculous when you get inside them, and it's all in the details, you know, but it's just like, if there was ever any choice of what to use in any scenario, it's I want to use things for sonic reasons first and quality. Yeah. You know, and so they're a little expensive, you know, but they're meant for people. If you ever get a chance to experience one, I think you'll be.
Well, I think we're gonna have to find our way up there.
Convinced
at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, you do, man. You really got to come down to Gabe's shop. It's
Tell
awesome.
us real quick about. So I got this gorgeous pedal in front of me. So you've mentioned at least 2 more pedals that you're working on, right?
Yeah.
So okay.
So the FQ12, the FQ12 is basically it started a couple of years back when I designed a guitar, the Esperanto recording.
And the FQ12, just for reference, that's the range master that we were referencing at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, I lovingly refer to it as the range bastard.
Range bastard.
Yeah.
Right on.
So I basically took some elements out of an early 50s design that was basically used to design EQs, parametrics, and that kind of thing. It was a notch filter device that the early RCA guys used to kind of get the capacitor selection right to do the variable resistance on. And we used that beginning staple as the jumping off point. One thing that I noticed was that each value of the capacitor kind of does a certain thing to the volume. So I wanted to add a gain section so that it could actually create unity in the device itself.
I appreciate that, because other rotary things that I've messed with, you're like, hey, that sounds great. Let me just boost that up. And then you click the next one and you're like, oh, Lord.
Yeah. So I wanted to create something that you could actually use functionally, speaking in a recording environment in particular. And if that worked in some other environment, awesome. But mostly it was for Jack Douglas and Josh Homme when they started their records with Joe and with Queens, to be able to use it as a tool in the recording process. And it just kind of morphed into a guitar pedal, basically. And by design, and by function, it works well with bass, vocals, and guitar.
Yeah.
Originally, I had intended to be an API unit and guitar pedal instead, because that's
well, I'm glad it did.
I do.
And then you're working on a couple new ones that you referenced.
Yeah.
Can you discuss those, or you want to save it?
I mean, one is a jumping off point from that is just an additional gain stage, so that you can actually access stuff that guys like Brian May put to great effect on News of the World and things like those recordings, which I'm a slave to. And also some Octavia effects and things like that are going up next year. So
awesome. So well, you guys got to keep us posted on all that business so that we can share that with. We've got a pretty active Facebook group, and for those who are not on it but are listening, get yourself over to the Facebook group and share your guitar stories and thoughts and comment on everybody else's as well. Okay, we mentioned that we had something special at the end of the show. We're almost at the end of the show, so
spill the beans.
We'll just spill the beans right now. So go ahead, Gabriel, you want to...
The FQ12.
The FQ12, the pedal that we've been talking about.
I guess you guys are going to do a raffle or something like that. I don't know.
Some sort of, how do I want to say this, fair way. I don't know how we're going to do it yet, because
I think what they could do is they could put their name and address on the back of a $20 bill and send it to us.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So basically,
and we'll draw one of those $20 bills.
That's right. So here's the deal. This is how we're going to handle this. We're going to, we will put out an announcement. I haven't sorted this out yet, because Gabriel just, came in and said, hey, I want to put this pedal in the hands of the listeners. We want to give this pedal away to the listeners. Hugely grateful for that. So we're going to determine how we're going to do that, and we will make an announcement. I would imagine probably on our site.
Let's just say post haste.
We'll post haste it, or our Facebook. So just make sure that you're staying close. Once we do actually find out, we'll bring it up in a next episode, so that everybody has clear and fair warning of how that will best be handled. Might be in a newsletter. I'm not really sure yet. Haven't sorted that out. But this thing is sweet. But it's
going to be great.
It's sweet. And you know what we're going to do?
It's a big deal, man.
We're gonna put a picture of this up, so that when you hear this, you'll at least be able to hear or see what this pedal looks like that we're talking about. Anyway, so... that is super, super cool. And this is a super limited run, right? I mean, how many have you made of these?
I think we've only made about 30.
30, yeah. And this is, if we crack the back on this, I bet it'd be a pretty low number.
I'll sign it.
He's going to sign it. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we will crack the back and sign. Or you can just sign the back. However you want to sign it, that's up to you. It's your pedal.
Yeah.
Okay, we are going to bring this home, everybody. A couple things to go through real quick. Jared?
Well, it's time for Would You Rather?
All right.
Okay, this week's Would You Rather. You're building a guitar,
Or actually, rather, you're having Gabriel of Echopark Guitars build you a guitar.
When you're choking on your words, who is it? What?
Quit picking on me. Okay. So this week's Would You Rather, you're going to have Gabriel at Echopark Guitars build you a guitar.
Yes.
Would you rather have a nylon nut or would you rather have the bone nut?
Okay.
Which material do you want Gabriel to use for a nut?
All right. Eric. Oh, you got to, yeah. Yeah, well, you
okay, is that nylon like the old Gibson nylon, like that kind of nylon?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, I'm still going to go with bone. I don't know, although I dig those. I really do. And I think that out of all the nylon materials I've seen used for nuts, whatever Gibson used, there was something special going on there. It's pretty unique, I think. Yeah. I'm talking about like pre-65 or something like that. Like back, I don't know what that was. Is that nylon? Was there? Yeah. I guess they were, and that's an amazing piece of material, and I don't know, modern technology has lost that kind of thing or what, because nobody seems to be able to make that kind of nut again. I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, and they also use nylon saddles.
That's right, which I'm a big fan of. Sorry, because when you say saddles, I'm going to go with nylon. My 64 335, my 64 SG. My 68 Les Paul, all those had nylon saddles, and
all the nylon now is different.
It's different. It's different. No, that stuff was very musical, and it wasn't dead by any means.
Right. It's really dense.
It is dense. It is dense. Yet you didn't get the same kind of string breakage problems, and it wasn't quite so metallic, which I found to sometimes the bridge pickups, and many of the Gibsons from the eras that I just mentioned. That would make it sound really metallic, and it depends on what you're into. But I always found the nylon saddles to be a big, big bonus.
Okay.
But bone nut, I'll go with the bone nut.
Cool.
Bone nut. Okay.
Yeah.
Bone nut.
Bovine.
Bovine.
Or camel.
I prefer bovine, actually. Camel is a little more porous.
Really?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow, you guys just went 100 different kinds of deep on me. I was not
It's a type of bone.
Yeah, I get it's a type of bone, but now you're talking about the pore structure.
Bovine is cattle.
Yeah.
How about whalebone?
Okay.
If you go to Alaska, I think if you could go out on the...
We're in Ohio.
Yeah, so we're in Ohio. We're going to make...
Are we? Doesn't seem like it.
So you're picking bone nut.
I'm thinking bovine.
Bovine bone.
I'm going bone. Bone.
Why?
All right.
I guess maybe I'm a traditionalist. Every guitar that I've ever had, if it didn't have a bone nut, it does now. And there's just something about the density of it, the sound of it. It's a brighter material, I think.
Okay.
You didn't give me the option of doing a brass nut.
No, that wasn't part of it. Okay, Jared.
Oh, this is tough for me because I know the effects of both materials.
Yes.
And especially the pre-65 Gibson nylon because I've owned many SGs with that material. But being that I've had more bone nuts on guitars than the pre-65, I'm going to go with bone.
Okay.
Definitely bone.
I'm picking bone too because I got a bunch of professionals in here that say bone. I'm going with bone. I haven't had the super old nylon because I don't own any ultra vintage guitars, unfortunately, because I've got kids and stuff. So, anyways.
What about athlete's foot or jock itch?
Oh boy,
there's got to be something.
That's on the next episode.
Okay, we'll leave that.
Oh no, I'm going with athlete's foot.
Hey,
herpes or crabs?
Tony, give us the deal here, bud.
Okay. Hold your horses. What's the rush?
I'm hungry.
Oh, Jared's hungry.
Yeah, we all are.
Well, as long as that's all it is. We would like to thank our executive producers for their support of our podcast, the Guitar Knobs podcast, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big benefits, I believe, Jared, is...
Well, if you pay enough...
Well, that makes it sound like really crappy, if you pay enough.
Well, if you're at a certain level of being a patron, you get to have your name right on the thing, man.
And that would be at the executive producer level.
Yes, right.
So, without further ado... I would like to thank we would all like to thank. Even Gabriel, I think, wants to thank him. Tom Barazin, Martin Cliff, David Wolfson, Matt Brammer, Carlos Mancha, Pete Marshall, Derek Fitzer, Robin Smith, John Daly, Oliver Gonzalez, Sean S.
And Clarence Leo Fender.
And Clarence Leo
Even though
Fender,
he's not an executive producer, we'll thank him.
He's
too.
sort of the official. Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Chris Kearney, John Anglin, Robert Marfleet, Alex Leggett, and Darren Gregory.
That is correct.
If you, and I'm talking about the guy standing behind Todd there, if you would like to become an executive producer, head over to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/The Guitar Knobs to find out how.
Thank you. Very good. Gabriel and Eric, where can people find your wares?
Echoparkguitars.com.
Tony, where can they find your stuff?
They can go to pickguardian.com. They can go to the various social media.
Great. Jared.
That would be BrandonWoundPickups.com. My email is on the website.
Ta-da.
Ta-da.
Todd, how can they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of us at theguitarknobs.com. That's where all of our podcasts and Four on the Floor are located. Please go check them out. They go back quite a ways. We're up to 80 some odd episodes now. Thanks to all of you for listening.
Thank you.
Guys, we are so just incredibly happy that you were able to stop by and grace our little studio here and sharing those are meaningful stories, and we appreciate you taking the time to share them.
Very cool stuff.
Gracias.
Yes.
Gato.
Yes. We will hear from you for sure in the future. And for now, subscribe!
Yeah.
Well, that's it for these knobs. Please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/The Guitar Knobs. Visit our website at theguitarknobs.com for all of our past episodes, Four on the Floor blog, and other good stuff. You can connect with us on social too at our Facebook page and share your gear and stories on our Facebook group. Also, be sure to check out our Instagram at Guitar Knobs. Catch you next time.